Black people are indigenous to the Americas. Research material for the Inquisitive. Introduction. This book is research material for those inquiring about the race of the indigenous inhabitants of the Americas. I give the raw data, and it is up to the researcher to make their own conclusion. When referencing material from other books, I include enough information such that the reader can see the entire context of what was written. I also include the page number, location of the book, and the exact name of the PDF file, if applicable. I will not try to sway nor dissuade an opinion one way or the other. I have no opinion one way or another. The raw data is the raw data. Information in square brackets is notes I have inserted into text, usually when defining a word. Information in curly brackets is side notes placed in the document as inline notes. Italic text below each header is my brief introduction to a section. Each section begins on an odd-numbered page. Some sections are quick and short, while others are extremely long. It is not necessary to read the sections in chronological order. The sections can be read in any order, without loss of continuity. Some sections will include a page of introductory information before indicating the complexion of the inhabitants. This is done on purpose, to give the researcher an idea of the context in which the documentation is written. For the curious minds, I have listed a summary of the different types of complexions documented in this book. See below. There are some pitfalls that the reader must pay attention to, as I learned the hard way in the course of their research. The pitfalls are listed below also. Complexions. First, it is important to note the definition of tawny and swarthy. Tawny is defined as a brown-skinned person. Swarthy is defined as being a dark complexion or a dark hue. A summary of the adjectives listed in this book to describe the complexion of the Native Americans are listed below. Black, black-swart, blacker than other tribes, brown, brown-yellow, brown-red, browner color, brunette, chestnut color, cinnamon color, copper cast, copper-colored skin, copper complexion, coppery complexion, dark, dark bronze color, dark brown hue, dark color, dark complexions, dark copper-colored, dark of complexion, dark-skinned, darker than copper, deep brunette, deep chests, chestnuts, dingy brown, dirty copper-colored, dirty dark red, dull brown, hazel complexion, light copper color, lighter copper color, orange tawny, pale yellow, reddish brown, swart, swarthy, tawny red color. I have placed the words above in bold italic to quickly enable the researcher to find such information in the text. Pitfalls. The East Indies is near China. The West Indies is in the Caribbean. Both inhabitants are called Indian. Our interest is in the West Indies. Indians, inhabitants from the country of India, are called Indian. Native inhabitants of the Americas are called Indians. People in the islands near the East Indies, Taiwan, for example, are called Indians. Our interest is with the native inhabitants of the Americas. Guinea is a country in Africa. West Coast New Guinea is a large island in the southwest Pacific region, near Australia. Papua New Guinea, a country in Oceania, near Australia. Guyana, also known as Guyana, is in South America. Our interest is with the Guianas in South America. Note: although Guyana is spelled differently than Guinea, it might be confusing to a person who is new to geography. Giovanni di Verrazzano. In 1524, Giovanni di Verrazzano wrote a letter to King Francis depicting the people in the Carolinas as being black like Ethiopians. Pages 3 to 20. The Verrazzano letter according to the original version. Captain John Giovanni di Verrazzano to His Most Serene Majesty the King of France writes: since the tempests which we encountered on the northern coasts, I have not written to your Most Serene and Christian Majesty concerning the 4 ships sent out by your orders on the ocean to discover new lands, because I thought you must have been before apprised of all that had happened to us, that we had been compelled by the impetuous violence of the winds to put into Brittany in distress with only the 2 ships Normandy and Dolphin, and that after having repaired these ships, we made a cruise in them, well armed, along the coast of Spain, as your Majesty must have heard, and also of our new plan of continuing our begun voyage with the Dolphin alone. From this voyage being now returned, proceed to give your Majesty an account of our discoveries. On the 17th of last January, 1524, we set sail from a desolate rock near the inland of Madeira, belonging to His Most Serene Majesty the King of Portugal, with 50 men, having provisions sufficient for 8 months, arms and other warlike munition, and naval stores. Sailing westward with a light and pleasant easterly breeze, in 25 days, we ran 800 leagues. On the 24th of February we encountered as violent a hurricane as any ship ever weathered, from which we escaped unhurt by the divine assistance and goodness, to the praise of the glorious and fortunate name of our good ship, that had been able to support the violent tossing of the waves. Pursuing our voyage towards the west, a little northwardly. In 24 days more march, having run 400 leagues, we reached a new country, Carolina coast, which had never before been seen by anyone, either in ancient or modern times. At first it appeared to be very low, but on approaching it to within a quarter of a league from the shore we perceived, by the great fires near the coast, that it was inhabited. We perceived that it stretched to the south, and coasted along in that direction in search of some port, in which we might come to anchor, and examine into the nature of the country. But for 50 leagues we could find none in which we could lie securely. Seeing the coast still stretched to the south, we resolved to change our course, and stand to the northward, and as we still had the same difficulty, we drew in with the land and sent a boat on shore. Many people who were seen coming to the seaside fled at our approach, but occasionally stopping, they looked back upon us with astonishment, and some were at length induced, by various friendly signs, to come to us. These showed the greatest delight on beholding us, wondering at our dress, countenances, and complexion. They then showed us by signs where we could more conveniently secure our boat, and offered us some of their provisions, that your majesty may know all that we learned, while on shore, of their manners and customs of life. I will relate what we saw as briefly as possible. They go entirely naked, except that about the loins they wear skins of small animals, like martens fastened by a girdle of plaited grass, to which they tie, all round the body, the toils of other animals hanging down to the knees. All other parts of the body and the head are naked. Some wear garlands similar to birds' feathers. The complexion of these people is black, not much different from that of the Ethiopians. Their hair is black and thick, and not very long. It is worn tied back upon the head in the form of a little tail. In person they are of good proportions, of middle stature, a little above our own, broad across the breast, strong in the arms, and well formed in the legs and other parts of the body. The only exception to their good looks is that they have broad faces. But not all, however, as we saw many that had sharp ones, with large black eyes and a fixed expression. They are not very strong in body, but acute in mind, active and swift of foot, as far as we could judge by observation. In these last two particulars they resemble the people of the East, especially those the most remote. We could not learn a great many particulars of their usages on account of our short stay among them, and the distance of our ship from the shore. We found not far from this people another whose mode of life we judged to be similar. The whole shore is covered with fine sand, about 15 feet thick, rising in the form of little hills about 50 paces broad. Ascending farther, we found several arms of the sea which make in through inlets, washing the shores on both sides as the coast runs. An outstretched country, the Carolinas, appears at a little distance, rising somewhat above the sandy shore, in beautiful fields and broad plains, covered with immense forests of trees, more or less dense, too various in colors, and too delightful and charming in appearance to be described. I do not believe that they are like the Hercynian forest, or the rough wilds of Scythia, and the northern regions full of vines and common trees, but adorned with palms, laurels, cypresses, and other varieties unknown in Europe, that send forth the sweetest fragrance to a great distance, but which we could not examine more closely for the reasons before given, and not on account of any difficulty in traversing the woods, which, on the contrary, are easily penetrated. As the Orient stretches around this country, I think it cannot be devoid of the same medicinal and aromatic drugs, and various riches of gold, and the like, as is denoted by the color of the ground. It abounds also in animals, as deer, stags, hares, and many other similar, and with a great variety of birds for every kind of pleasant and delightful sports. It is plentifully supplied with lakes and ponds of running water, and being in the latitude of 34, the air is salubrious, pure, and temperate, and free from the extremes of both heat and cold. There are no violent winds in these regions. The most prevalent are the northwest and west. In summer, the season in which we were there, the sky is clear, with but little rain. If fogs and mists are at any time driven, and by the south wind, they are instantaneously dissipated, and at once it becomes serene and bright again. The sea is calm, not boisterous, and its waves are gentle. Although the whole coast is low and without harbors, it is not dangerous for navigation, being free from rocks and bold, so that within 4 or 5 fathoms from the shore there is 24 feet of water at all times of tide, and this depth constantly increases in a uniform proportion. The holding ground is so good that no ship can part her cable, however violent the wind, as we proved by experience, for while riding at anchor on the coast, we were overtaken by a gale in the beginning of March, when the winds are high, as is usual in all countries. We found our anchor broken before it started from its hold or moved at all. We set sail from this place, continuing to coast along the shore, which we found stretching out to the west, North Carolina, the inhabitants being numerous. We saw everywhere a multitude of fires. While at anchor on this coast, there being no harbor to enter, we sent the boat on shore with 25 men to obtain water. But it was not possible to land without endangering the boat, on account of the immense high surf thrown up by the sea, as it was an open roadstead. Many of the natives came to the beach, indicating by various friendly signs that we might trust ourselves on shore. One of their noble deeds of friendship deserves to be made known to your majesty. A young suitor was attempting to swim ashore through the surf to carry them some knickknacks, as little bells, looking glasses, and other like trifles. When he came near 3 or 4 of them he tossed the things to them, and turned about to get back to the boat. But he was thrown over by the waves, and so dashed by them, that he lay as it were dead upon the beach. When these people saw him in this situation, they ran, and took him up by the head, legs and arms, and carried him to a distance from the surf. The young man, finding himself borne off in this way, uttered very loud shrieks in fear and dismay, while they answered as they could in their language, showing him that he had no cause for fear. Afterwards they laid him down at the foot of a little hill, when they took off his shirt and trousers, and examined him, expressing the greatest astonishment at the whiteness of his skin. Our sailors in the boat, seeing a great fire made up, and their companion placed very near it, full of fear, as is usual in all cases of novelty, imagined that the natives were about to roast him for food. But as soon as he had recovered his strength, after a short stay with them, showing by signs that he wished to return aboard, they hugged him with great affection, and accompanied him to the shore. Then leaving him, that he might feel more secure, they withdrew to a little hill, from which they watched him until he was safe in the boat. This young man remarked that these people were black like the others, that they had shining skins, middle stature, and sharper faces, and very delicate bodies and limbs, and that they were inferior in strength, but quick in their minds. This is all that he observed of them. Departing hence, and always following the shore, which stretched to the north, we came, in the space of 50 leagues, to another land, which appeared very beautiful and full of the largest forests, Delaware and New Jersey coast. We approached it, and going ashore with 20 men, we went back from the coast about 2 leagues, and found that the people had fled, and hid themselves in the woods for fear. By searching around we discovered in the grass a very old woman, and a young girl of about 18 or 20, who had concealed themselves for the same reason. The old woman carried 2 infants on her shoulders, and behind her neck a little boy 8 years of age. When we came up to them they began to shriek and make signs to the men who had fled to the woods. We gave them a part of our provisions, which they accepted with delight, but the girl would not touch any, everything we offered to her being thrown down in great anger. We took the little boy from the old woman to carry with us France, and would have taken the girl also, who was very beautiful and very tall, but it was impossible because of the loud shrieks she uttered as we attempted to lead her away. Having to pass some woods, and being far from the ship, we determined to leave her and take the boy only. We found them fairer than the others, and wearing a covering made of certain plants, which hung down from the branches of the trees, tying them together with threads of wild hemp. Their heads are without covering and of the same shape as the others. Their food is a kind of pulse which there abounds, different in color and size from ours, and of a very delicious flavor. Besides they take birds and fish for food, using snares and bows made of hard wood, with reeds for arrows, in the ends of which they put the bones of fish and other animals. The animals in these regions are wilder than in Europe from being continually molested by the hunters. We saw many of their boats made of one tree 20 feet long and 4 feet broad, without the aid of stone or iron or other kind of metal. In the whole country, for the space of 200 leagues, which we visited, we saw no stone of any sort. To hollow out their boats they burn out as much of a log as is requisite, and also from the prow and stern to make them float well on the sea. The land, in situation, fertility, and beauty, is like the other, abounding also in forests filled with various kinds of trees, but not of such fragrance, as it is more northern and colder. We saw in this country many vines growing naturally, which entwine about the trees, and run up upon them as they do in the plains of Lombardy. These vines would doubtless produce excellent wine if they were properly cultivated and attended to, as we have often seen the grapes which they produce very sweet and pleasant, and not unlike our own. They must be held in estimation by them, as they carefully remove the shrubbery from around them, wherever they grow, to allow the fruit to ripen better. We found also wild roses, violets, lilies, and many sorts of plants and fragrant flowers different from our own. We cannot describe their habitations, as they are in the interior of the country, but from various indications we conclude they must be formed of trees and shrubs. We saw also many grounds for conjecturing that they often sleep in the open air, without any covering but the sky. Of their other usages we know nothing. We believe, however, that all the people we were among live in the same way. After having remained here 3 days, riding at anchor on the coast, as we could find no harbor, we determined to depart, and coast along the shore to the northeast, keeping sail on the vessel only by day, and coming to anchor by night. After proceeding 100 leagues, we found a very pleasant situation among some steep hills, through which a very large river, deep at its mouth, forced its way to the sea New York harbor. From the sea to the estuary of the river, any ship heavily laden might pass, with the help of the tide, which rises 8 feet. But as we were riding at anchor in a good berth, we would not venture up in our vessel, without a knowledge of the mouth. Therefore we took the boat, and entering the river, we found the country on its banks well peopled, the inhabitants not differing much from the others, being dressed out with feathers of birds of various colors. They came towards us with evident delight, raising loud shouts of admiration, and showing us where we could most securely land with our boat. We passed up this river, about half a league, when we found it formed a most beautiful lake 3 leagues in circuit, upon which they were rowing 30, or more of their small boats, from one shore to the other, filled with multitudes who came to see us. All of a sudden, as is wont to happen to navigators, a violent contrary wind blew in from the sea, and forced us to return to our ship, greatly regretting to leave this region which seemed so commodious and delightful, and which we supposed must also contain great riches, as the hills showed many indications of minerals. Weighing anchor, we sailed 80 otanta leagues towards the east, as the coast stretched in that direction, and always in sight of it. At length we discovered an island of a triangular form, about 10 leagues from the mainland, in size about equal to the island of Rhodes, having many hills covered with trees, and well peopled. Judging from the great number of fires which we saw all around its shores, we gave it the name of Your Majesty's illustrious mother. We did not land there, as the weather was unfavorable, but proceeded to another place, 15 leagues distant from the island, where we found a very excellent harbor, Newport Harbor. Before entering it, we saw about 20 small boats full of people, who came about our ship, uttering many cries of astonishment, but they would not approach nearer than within 50 paces. Stopping, they looked at the structure of our ship, our persons and dress. Afterwards they all raised a loud shout together, signifying that they were pleased. By imitating their signs, we inspired them in some measure with confidence, so that they came near enough for us to toss to them some little bells and glasses, and many toys, which they took and looked at, laughing, and then came on board without fear. Among them were 2 kings more beautiful in form and stature than can possibly be described. One was about 40 years old, the other about 24, and they were dressed in the following manner. The oldest had a deer skin around his body, artificially wrought in damask figures. His head was without covering. His hair was tied back in various knots. Around his neck he wore a large chain ornamented with many stones of different colors. The young man was similar in his general appearance. This is the finest looking tribe, and the handsomest in their costumes, that we have found in our voyage. They exceed us in size, and they are of a very fair complexion. Some of them incline more to a white, and others to a tawny color. Their faces are sharp, their hair long and black, upon the adorning of which they bestow great pains. Their eyes are black and sharp, their expression mild and pleasant, greatly resembling the antique. I say nothing to Your Majesty of the other parts of the body, which are all in good proportion, and such as belong to well-formed men. Their women are of the same form and beauty, very graceful, of fine countenances, and pleasing appearance in manners and modesty. They wear no clothing except a deer skin, ornamented like those worn by the men. Some wear very rich lynx skins upon their arms, and various ornaments upon their heads, composed of braids of hair, which also hang down upon their breasts on each side. Others wear different ornaments, such as the women of Egypt and Syria use. The older and the married people, both men and women, wear many ornaments in their ears, hanging down in the oriental manner. We saw upon them several pieces of wrought copper, which is more esteemed by them than gold, as this is not valued on account of its color, but is considered by them as the most ordinary of the metals. Yellow being the color especially disliked by them, azure and red are those in highest estimation with them. Of those things which we gave them, they prized most highly the bells, azure crystals, and other toys to hang in their ears and about their necks. They do not value or care to have silk or gold stuffs, or other kinds of cloth, nor implements of steel or iron. When we showed them our arms, they expressed no admiration, and only asked how they were made. The same was the case with the looking glasses, which they returned to us, smiling, as soon as they had looked at them. They are very generous, giving away whatever they have. We formed a great friendship with them, and one day we entered into the port with our ship, having before rowed at the distance of a league from the shore, as the weather was adverse. They came off to the ship with a number of their little boats, with their faces painted in divers colors, showing us real signs of joy, bringing us of their provisions, and signifying to us where we could best ride in safety with our ship, and keeping with us until we had cast anchor. We remained among them 15 days, to provide ourselves with many things of which we were in want, during which time they came every day to see our ship, bringing with them their wives, of whom they were very careful. For, although they came on board themselves, and remained a long while, they made their wives stay in the boats, nor could we ever get them on board by any entreaties, or any presents we could make them. One of the 2 kings often came with his queen and many attendants, to see us for his amusement, but he always stopped at the distance of about 200 paces, and sent a boat to inform us of his intended visit, saying they would come and see our ship. This was done for safety, and as soon as they had an answer from us they came off, and remained a while to look around. But on hearing the annoying cries of the sailors, the king sent the queen, with her attendants, in a very light boat, to wait, near an island a quarter of a league distant from us, while he remained a long time on board, talking with us by signs, and expressing his fanciful notions about everything in the ship, and asking the use of all. After imitating our modes of salutation, and tasting our food, he courteously took leave of us. Sometimes, when our men stayed 2 or 3 days on a small island, near the ship, for their various necessities, as sailors are wont to do, he came with 7 or 8 of his attendants, to inquire about our movements, often asking us if we intended to remain there long, and offering us everything at his command, and then he would shoot with his bow, and run up and down with his people, making great sport for us. We often went 5 or 6 leagues into the interior, and found the country as pleasant as is possible to conceive, adapted to cultivation of every kind, whether of corn, wine or oil. There are open plains 25 or 30 leagues in extent, entirely free from trees or other hindrances, and of so great fertility, that whatever is sown there will yield an excellent crop. On entering the woods, we observed that they might all be traversed by an army ever so numerous. The trees of which they were composed were oaks, cypresses, and others, unknown in Europe. We found, also, apples, plums, filberts, and many other fruits, but all of a different kind from ours. The animals, which are in great numbers, as stags, deer, lynxes, and many other species, are taken by snares, and by bows, the latter being their chief implement. Their arrows are wrought with great beauty, and for the heads of them, they use emery, jasper, hard marble, and other sharp stones. In the place of iron they also use the same kind of sharp stones in cutting down trees, and with them they construct their boats of single logs, hollowed out with admirable skill, and sufficiently commodious to contain 10 or 12 persons. Their oars are short and broad at the end, and are managed in rowing by force of the arms alone, with perfect security, and as nimbly as they choose. We saw their dwellings, which are of a circular form, of about 10 or 12 paces in circumference, made of logs split in halves, without any regularity of architecture, and covered with roofs of straw, nicely put on, which protect them from wind and rain. There is no doubt that they would build stately edifices if they had workmen as skillful as ours, for the whole sea coast abounds in shining stones, crystals, and alabaster, and for the same reason it has ports and retreats for animals. They change their habitations from place to place as circumstances of situation and season may require. This is easily done, as they have only to take with them their mats, and they have other houses prepared at once. The father and the whole family dwell together in one house in great numbers. In some we saw 25 or 30 persons. Their food is pulse, as with the other tribes, which is here better than elsewhere, and more carefully cultivated. In the time of sowing they are governed by the moon, the sprouting of grain and many other ancient usages. They live by hunting and fishing, and they are long-lived. If they fall sick, they cure themselves without medicine, by the heat of the fire, and their death at last comes from extreme old age. We judge them to be very affectionate and charitable towards their relatives, making loud lamentations in their adversity, and in their misery calling to mind all their good fortune. At their departure out of life, their relations mutually join in weeping, mingled with singing, for a long while. This is all that we could learn of them. This region is situated in the parallel of Rome, being 41 degrees 40 of north latitude, but much colder from accidental circumstances, and not by nature, as I shall hereafter explain to your Majesty, and confine myself, at present, to the description of its local situation. It looks towards the south, on which side the citation. Sailors' narratives of voyages along the New England coast. 1524 to 1624. Boston, Houghton, Mifflin, 1905. Sailors' Narratives of Voyages along the PDF. Web, books.google.com. Pages 3 to 20.